Welcome to the Fox Den Podcast, where leaders gather to grow. Well, welcome everybody to the Fox Den, where leaders gather to grow, and we have another great episode for you today. I'm bringing Choe in here today, who is a conductor who works around the world, who I've now known for 12 years, approximately, give or take. She had joined me with the Golden State Pops Orchestra some years ago, and then has gone, way beyond that internationally since then. And I thought it would be great to bring her in today, talk about leadership, yet again from a conductor's perspective, and working with musicians. But as we all know, that's something that leadership can go across platforms in many ways. So I hope that there's things that you can all grab from this today and take into your own lives. But hello, Holly. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a huge honor to be on this podcast with you.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to have you because you've been doing some incredible things. From when we were together 12 years ago to you left California, went overseas, and now that's where you're mainly are, correct? Tell us a little bit of where you are over there.
Right. I'm based in Mannheim in Germany. I moved here actually only 6 months ago, but before that I was in Frankfurt and before in Zurich, Switzerland for about 6 years while doing two master's degrees.
Yes, Switzerland is on my bucket list of places to go. That's the top of my list of places to go.
I cannot agree more. I mean, it's just a place of heaven. The nature, the food, the people, the beautiful sceneries are it's just like from a postcard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
My grandfather, both of his parents came from there. They had immigrated on the same boat to the United States, but then didn't actually meet until years later, started dating, and then found out that they had come over on the same ship. Um,
That's crazy.
yeah,
Wow.
so it's a place I need to get to one day. Um,
Mm,
so something that I've noticed as I've, watched your career build over the last 12 or so years, and I noticed this back when you were working with us at GSPO. um, there's an aspect to what you do that's very selfless. You're at a place in your career where over the last 10 or so years, things have been building. You're making decisions to further yourself along as a conductor and a musician and get to the next step. And this is a stepping stone to this and all of that, which for many people, I remember getting advice from college professors telling me when you start off your career, it's a very selfish time period. So make sure you're thinking about yourself and what the next thing is for you. But something I noticed with you as you've been building a career these last 10 years with everything you're doing is a very selfless part of what you do. That the way you seem to communicate to musicians from videos I've been watching, or even back when you would talk to the musicians here, or the way that you talk about groups. I was telling you earlier that I saw your little post about the 10th anniversary of is it the Reflector
ensemble
Ensemble?
reflector. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and the way that you're talking about the group is so it's about them. It's about how great they are. It's not about, how much I love working with you. It's about how much of a privilege it is for you to work with them. It's those types of things that you say that make me realize, wow, she really sees her role as the conductor in a certain way that permeates through the interviews you do, through the videos that you make, through the way that you communicate, which I assume comes through in all of your jobs. That in this time period, as you've been building, you haven't lost touch with what I assume is some kind of a philosophy you have on what your role is as the conductor. And I thought we would talk a
Mm,
little bit about that of what is it about your perspective on what you're doing in your career as a conductor that touches on what I've noticed in all these videos and these conversations we've had.
mm. Well, definitely, being a conductor, especially in our society, is, I think, even more challenging than before because of the balance of power. That is certainly different from even just 20 years ago. And being a young conductor, of course, has another layer of its difficulties and challenges. And I think my background as a Korean American, having grown up in a very conservative, traditional household, with my father being very conservative, and he and I have a 40-year gap. So he's sort of a late father compared to other people in his generation, maybe. And I just had a lot of respect drilled into me as a child. And on top of that, I remember reading a book on leadership, and it spoke about the different types of leadership. Where there was a category for a charismatic leader, but also a category for a servant type leader. And I always sort of felt myself drawing closer to the servant type. Um, while charisma and humor, all of these things are necessary, and I think these days conductors have to have all of it, but you also have to have enough social intelligence to know when to use what. But none of it can be pre-calculated, right? You need someone who naturally goes through being able to adjust in the moment and not pre-calculating, okay, now I need to crack a joke or now I need to be charismatic. And I think part of my life so far, having moved around so much, I was counting when I moved to Mannheim, this is my like 18th move in my life.
Wow.
Right. So it's just been a lot of collection of experiences that led me to being able to adjust so quickly to different tense moments or happy moments or sad moments in a rehearsal, and just being able to sort of act as a chameleon. But the baseline comes from respect and humility. And partially because I started classical music so late, I think that's where I felt was the right place to start, with a lot of humility and respect
Okay.
for the people in front of me. And my clarinet professor from Long Beach State, Cal State University, Long Beach, he passed away unfortunately a couple of years ago. Very, very sad. But Mr. Grego, Dr. Grego, he taught me when I switched from conducting to from clarinet playing to conducting. At first, he was really sad that I was leaving the master's program of clarinet playing when I was trying to decide which direction to go. But he
Hmm.
said, okay, go for conducting if that's what you really want. But remember that your level of knowledge will never outweigh the amount of knowledge in front of you in an orchestra
Right.
as a collective, right? So that was another one big advice that seeped into my brain that led me to where I am now, I would say.
Well,
Um,
that's great advice. The idea that the knowledge you have will never outweigh the collective knowledge of the musicians in the ensemble that you are leading. And
right.
I mean, that's something that can translate to any field. That
Hmm.
if you have the
Hmm.
right team and you've
Hmm.
got the right people in the right positions that are some of the best at what they do, then they know what to do.
Right.
And
And I think it was the Apple CEO, Tim Cook. He might have said, always hire people who are smarter than you
right, which it's funny
because of
because
this. Mm.
which isn't it kind of funny that great leaders always talk about hire people who are smarter than you or better than you in those areas where you're hiring them. But then there's so many leaders that their ego gets in the way and they forget, well, if I'm putting somebody who's better than me in this position, then why would I ever micromanage them? Why would I
Hmm.
ever push down on them? What I'd want to do is lift them up to be the best that they can be. But so many times, and I think it's great that from the very beginning you made this choice. You were well, it's not even you made a choice based on being introduced by some great mentors and some great professors and the book that you read to these concepts that already placed you in this servant, humble position, humility, and you've built from there. Obviously, that is all great advice. I think some of the words you said, leading with humility and leading as a servant. Would you say that when you started taking on some of these positions, was that from the beginning something that was already going through your mind, or is this something that has kind of evolved as you've been doing it?
I would say, actually, just speaking with a lot of friends who are in orchestras or in state opera orchestras, sometimes hearing their frustrations, and just the general feeling of our generation feeling not heard, people working in orchestras feeling not heard, not having enough room for creativity, feeling like they're stuck in a place. I just felt that when I take on a role as a music director or principal conductor or guest conductor, that I somehow should find a way to make them feel heard, to make the musicians feel that I'm there for. success together, not just for my own success, because that's already happening so much. There are many orchestra musicians who feel pressed down. Um,
Uh-huh.
Even though we have more of a democratic leadership style, even so, it's sometimes a hidden, right? It
Yeah.
seems democratic,
On
but
the
actually,
surface level,
right,
I'm here for you.
right.
But so, I
Mhm.
mean, do you have an example of either an instance where you have given them the ability to come through, or at least advice on a way you approach that, whether it's an example or just advice of how you go about making the musician feel heard?
I think in the rehearsal, of course, you have to have a strong opinion. You have to have your strong interpretation already from before walking onto the first rehearsal. You need to have done your homework to know the score inside and out. And usually, when you present your interpretation in the first, let's say, 20 minutes of doing a run through or starting to rehearse something, musicians, I think, can instantly feel, this person knows what they want, and it's easy to follow. Versus when you have a conductor who sort of knows what they want, and maybe seems insecure, in the first few minutes, you can feel, oh God, this is going to be a horrible week. It's going to be a rough week. And in that sense, of course, I come almost like a king or queen, like an authoritarian, to know what I want, and I'm ready to give my arguments should there be any counter attacks. But I think in the way of speaking, in your language, it matters a lot, each word you choose, your diction choice. So it's instead of I want this and that, you can refer to the composer. Beethoven probably would have wanted this, or I feel that, Liszt would have wanted this, or let us discover what Shostakovich really meant, knowing, and then you can speak about the history of the piece. You can tie in the
Right.
context of the piece. In 1945, when he wrote the Ninth Symphony, we knew that he was in these conditions for that reason, etc. Of course, you cannot speak so long in rehearsal, but I have found a slight tip for conducting rehearsals, that I try not to speak too much in the first half of the first rehearsal, but especially in the second half, or in the second rehearsal, when you do the most deepest detail work. Because of course, from the first rehearsal you wanted to go to the macro view, then the micro view, back to the macro. And
Mhm.
during the time when you have the time to discuss really small details, that's the chance for you to show the orchestra that you've done your work. So you can share very interesting historical context that actually ties into the musical idea that you're trying to achieve. So that's
Right.
sort of my flow in rehearsal, and I think that gains a lot of trust from the musicians. And the thing about this leadership style, I guess, showing trust is a big part of that. Because if you were too much focused on yourself and you're imposing your ideas, there is no room for trust. You don't need trust, because I'm just, too good to be on stage, and I will share with you, or not even share, I will tell you what to do or how to play.
Right.
Yeah, but if you come from a place of humility, I think trust is also like a currency you exchange with the orchestra.
So do you find that as you're working on a piece of music, coming at it from this perspective, do you find yourself sometimes starting to adjust your interpretation based on what you hear coming from that ensemble? Is if what I hear you saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that when you come with that preparation and you come with that, I know what I'm looking for, I know my interpretation, and then you're able to relay that to them when they start trusting you and you start trusting them, they kind of let their guard down. They put some of themselves into what they're playing, and then you might hear from that something that you hadn't thought of, because now they're bringing their experience and artistry to the table, and then you start to adjust with that. Is that a fair way to say interpret what you're saying?
I think in the term adjusting, there should be clarification on what you adjust. So you don't necessarily adjust your interpretation, because then the road is not clear anymore to get to the goal.
Uh-huh.
But you could adjust in terms of how much timing or how much direction or how much accelerando you will do or when you start the accelerando. It depends on so many things, like the amount of technical ability an orchestra has,
Hmm.
the amount of flexibility. It also depends what they've done the week before, what they've played the week before, versus what they're going to play the week after. Are their, mental capacity and physical capacity, are they reserving for the week after because they're going to do a huge Mahler or Strauss piece? And
Right.
you have just, quote unquote, just a Mozart classical program in your week, so they're, therefore they're focusing their all of their energy on the next week, or the week before, vice versa. Have they come from working with, Herbert Blomstedt, Maestro Blomstedt the week before, and now with a week with me, they're relaxing. It can
I
be.
had the same thing when I went to an orchestra to do Little Mermaid in concert, and they had just finished their regular classical season the week before. And
Hmm.
so all of them were kind of like, this is the start of summer. This is when I get to kind of relax a little bit. And
Right.
so the atmosphere had to be light. It had to be
Hmm. Hmm.
to that's interesting. So what you're saying though is adjustment, adapting, if you want to call it, isn't just
Hmm.
about the musician's ideas. It's about so many circumstances that are at play. We can't forget we're dealing with people. And wherever
Right.
they are in their own journey or their own life in the moment, we might have to adjust to that to some degree. And I love the fact
Yeah.
that you said the adjustment doesn't
Mm.
mean that you're changing the interpretation because
Hmm.
as we know as conductors, the interpretation of the music is the vision for the music,
Right.
and teams need vision. They need to
Hmm.
know where are we going to go. And so if you come to that first
Mm.
rehearsal knowing what you want and they trust that, and then you're willing to adjust around the pathway that gets you there
Exactly,
based on what
exactly.
you're getting from them,
Right.
everybody ends up succeeding in the
Right.
end.
It sort of makes me think of like a camping trip. You could, um knowing that you have a goal to get to, you could take on the first day, drive the most mileage on the first day so that you can relax as you go, or you could take it slow, and then the next day you drive harder, and I mean, you can, how you get there is what you're adjusting from, taking in, being sensitive to the musicians as human beings rather than musicians as people who work for you.
Right,
So
right.
this humanity, I think, is what also people notice, when we work together, because partially having come from maybe marching band, where it's such an atmosphere of family, and you're so close with every single person and you care about every single individual in a marching band. Having
Right.
maybe having had that experience, I'm not sure, or just the communal aspect of Korean culture where you cook for everybody, you share. It's a very generous culture. So maybe everything put together makes me, be more sensitive, to musicians perhaps than other conductors. And I do know that some they do notice. And it could be small things as, starting a rehearsal, already speaking about, okay, after the break, we're gonna reverse the movements so that the extra players can already leave. Just being
Right.
aware of, okay, how long does the cymbal player have to wait for their, fourth movement, or the triangle player, like Bruckner, was it 6 or 7, where there's only just one hit for the symbol in the triangle? I mean, are they going to wait, entire 2.5 hours for the last half an hour of their part of their
Right.
rehearsal? Just having these things in the back of the head, I think, also shows that I care about their time, having respect for their time.
You're so right. It's like those little things which take a little bit of preparation time,
Right,
but go
right.
a long way
Mm,
in helping the entire circumstance better.
right.
Great advice, though. I mean, to start from our conversation where you're talking about humility and a servant mentality to here at the end talking about adjusting and how to keep the vision in mind, how to send a message to your musicians and your team, what the vision is going to be from the very beginning. And I think that's a key thing you said that we didn't really touch on very much. And now we're running out of time, but it's the idea of you need to come to that rehearsal or that first meeting with your work done,
Mhm.
knowing what's the vision that I'm putting out there. Thank you so much for joining us today and bringing this great information. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really such a great reunion to be able to talk with you again.
Likewise,
Yeah.
let's not go 12 years again
Right, right,
before we talk
exactly.
again. So
Thank
thank
you
you,
so much.
everybody. Thank you for joining us today on the Fox's Den. You can get a hold of me at stephenallenfox.com. And Holly, do you have a website they can go to see what you're up to?
Sure. It's Holly, Hyun, Choe.com. It's my full
Wonderful.
name. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we'll see you next time on the Fox Den. Bye. Visit us at foxpoint.net and stephenallenfox.com.